The number of the day is 7.
That time, Peyton Manning threw 7 touchdowns in a single game. It had been 40 years since any NFL quarterback had thrown 7 touchdowns in a game.
Joe Cap has just tied a National Football League record by passing for 7 touchdowns in a single game.
September 5th, 2013, Peyton Manning ended that drought week 1 of the 2013 NFL season. We Broncos fans were just 8 months removed from one of the most heartbreaking playoff losses of all time, and unaware that we were on the cusp of seeing the greatest offense to ever take the field. We had no idea that 55 passing touchdowns and 606 total points were on the horizon. Back in January, the 13-3 Broncos hosted the AFC North champion Ravens a week after Baltimore took care of the Colts at home. In a true shootout that went all the way to double overtime, Denver came a fingertips length away from advancing, but were sent home via the right foot of Justin Tucker. Baltimore went on to defeat the Patriots in Foxborough, and in the midst of a blackout, withstood a 49ers comeback to win Super Bowl 47. Now, normally the Super Bowl champs open the season at home on Thursday night, but a scheduling conflict with the Orioles meant that the Ravens would have to begin their Super Bowl defense at Mile High. For the week before the game, a bit of controversy brewed as massive banners of both Peyton Manning and Joe Flacco hung down the side of then Sports Authority Field in Denver. Broncos fans were infuriated at the NFL, forced to drive past a 50-foot tribute to the man who had ended their season not long ago for their primetime matchup. It would be like if Tuck Rule Casino was built right next to the Raiders Stadium. There was even a petition on change.org to remove the signage. Peyton Manning called the banners strange, and even Joe Flacco understood the outrage, telling reporters that, "I don't think here or anybody in our city would be too happy if we had somebody else from a different team on our stadium." Woo! Now, I preface this 7-touchdown performance by saying all this to let you know there was a bitterness in the air when the fans gathered at Mile High to kick off the 2013 season. It was a time for revenge. And that wasn't the only thing in the air. The game was delayed half an hour due to a lightning strike in the area. There were some hard feelings going back to the offseason. Denver tried desperately to re-sign their star pass rusher Elvis Dumervil, but thanks to a really bizarre incident with a fax machine, mind you, this was only 2012, they were unable to come to a deal before the league year began. They missed the deadline, the Broncos, for a contract extension because of a fax machine, and lost Dumervil, who ended up signing a 5-year deal with the Ravens. And the Broncos also lost Von Miller for the first 6 games due to a suspension after he cheated on a drug test. How he got the answers ahead of time to that drug test, we'll never know.
I snuck one in.
So Denver, who had this potent pass rush the last 2 seasons, was down to free agent acquisition charger Sean Phillips, Nate Irving, and Robert Ayers. The onus was going to be on Peyton Manning and the offense. You would think that in order to throw 7 touchdowns in a single game, you'd have to get at least one of them out of the way in the first quarter, but that wasn't the case for the Broncos. This game actually started a bit slow, and it was the Ravens that broke the stalemate halfway through the first quarter with a Flacco to Vontae Leach touchdown. Ravens fans were hoping to get a lot more of these, given that the franchise had just committed to Joe Flacco long-term on a 6-year, $120 million extension that immediately made him the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and was in fact $1 million more per year than his opponent Peyton Manning. Again, that's maybe why they're a little shy to pay Lamar Jackson. But Flacco's armor was about to crack. I think deep down we all knew that as good as his postseason run had been, that was not who he truly was as a player. 3 minutes into the second quarter, he threw his first interception since week 14 of the previous year. which was against Denver. Also against Chris Harris, and it was about to unleash a flood that not even Flacco's former unibrow could stop. One play later, Manning faked a screen to Eric Big Dick Decker, hung in the pocket long enough for his receiver to get open and absorbed a shot from Chris Canty and hit tight end Julius Thomas for touchdown number 1. We remember Julius Thomas now as a great tight end for a 2-year run in 2013 and 2014 when he caught a combined 24 touchdowns, but he was essentially an unknown before this game. Although I drafted him in fantasy that year. John Elway picked Thomas in the 4th round out of Portland State back in 2011. Another basketball/football hybrid in the mold of Antonio Gates. Thomas got 1 pass for 5 yards in his first 2 seasons before he was fully healthy in 2013. And when he got on the field, his athleticism was a game changer for the Broncos offense. But he wasn't the only new addition that was about to take this Denver offense to the next level. In 2012, the Broncos brought back Brandon Stokely to play in the slot, Peyton Manning's guy on offense, and he ended up being an actual factor at age 36, hauling in 5 total touchdowns from his old friend, plus another in the playoffs. But another slot receiver ended up on the open market after 6 years in New England, where he caught 672 balls from Tom Brady and 1 tongue lashing from Tom's now ex, Giselle.
My husband cannot throw the ball and catch the ball at the same time.
Wes Welker joined the Denver Broncos to play with Peyton Manning, while Stokely landed back on the Ravens roster where he started his career in 1999. Welker was about to have a career best in touchdown grabs, but before that, he was going to start his Broncos career with a fuck-up. Welker muffed a Sam Coke punt inside the 5-yard line like he was on coke, which led to a Ray Rice touchdown that put the Ravens back on top. And this is when we could say Ray Rice punched that one in and nobody would blink an eye.
Going up.
I'll take the next one.
Welker would have to atone for his sins later and prove that he wasn't actually a saboteur sent over by Bill Belichick. But the Broncos fought back with a 44-yard catch and run by tight end Julius Thomas. On the very next play, Thomas blew up the Ravens defense again for a 23-yard score. Touchdown number 2, or 2, as the kids say. After trading blows for a few minutes, Baltimore mounted a drive that ended with a Justin Tucker field goal, giving them a 17-14 lead at halftime, where Michael Jackson's hologram would perform. Just kidding, but that would have been cool. On the very first play after the half, Elvis Dumervil blew by Julius Thomas and got an easy sack on his old teammate Peyton Manning. But after a clutch 3rd down throw to Wes Welker and a 34-yard screen to Demaryius Thomas, Denver was on the move and Manning was about to go deep to an unlikely target. Andre Bubba Caldwell, who played 4 years in Denver, the entirety of Peyton Manning's stint as a Bronco, primarily because Manning wanted him there. Caldwell was there for Manning's first game against the Steelers in September of 2012 and caught his last NFL pass in the first drive of Super Bowl 50, a crucial 22-yarder that set up the Broncos' first score in that game. Caldwell's last pass, not Manning's. Benny Fowler caught that. But now, he was about to catch his first touchdown in Denver. Caldwell beat Jimmy Smith and hauled in another perfectly placed pass from old Peyton Manning. Touchdown number 3. After a Sean Phillips sack, Broncos special teams ace David Bruton blocked a Sam Coke punt, setting up Wes Welker for redemption. On 2nd and goal, Welker broke Corey Graham's ankles and used those tiny little cartoon legs to scoot into the end zone. It was a play Welker had made 1,000 times as a Patriot, and his first in orange and blue. Touchdown number 4 looked really, really nice. And that felt good for Broncos fans because Corey Graham was essentially the guy that ended the Broncos season in the playoffs the year before, picking off a Brett Favre-like pass by Peyton Manning in overtime to set up the game-winning field goal. Graham also had a pick 6 in the first quarter that really flipped the game on its head. But back to the present. I mean the past. At 2013, Well, that playoff game was 2013. Fall of 2013 is where we are. Anyways, Wes Welker scored. Manning had thrown 2 touchdowns within 2 minutes of each other. The next Ravens drive ended abruptly when Raheem Moore blew up Dallas Clark, which might have been elder abuse at this point, separating him from the ball on 3rd and 8. It definitely wasn't going to make up for the play that shall not be named.
Into the end zone.
Hey, damn it, Johnny, I said it shall not be named. Take it off the screen. But it was a nice moment for him getting his confidence back. A very methodical drive took the Broncos down to the 2-yard line, and naturally in the red zone, you look for your 5'9", sub 200-pound receiver. Demaryius Thomas did a great job rubbing the corner and allowing Wes Welker to get wide open. That was touchdown number 5, and Manning's 3rd in under 6 minutes of the game. Now I should note that in his 17 games as a Denver Bronco prior to this, Manning had never thrown 5 touchdowns in a game. In fact, he had never thrown so much as 4 touchdowns in a game. The last time a Broncos QB threw for 5 touchdowns was 13 years earlier in 2000 when Gus Frerotte threw 4 picks and 5 touchdowns in a 17-point fourth quarter comeback against Ryan Leaf and the San Diego Chargers. That was Ryan Leaf's best NFL game, and he was outdueled by a backup with 4 interceptions. No Broncos quarterback had ever thrown 6 touchdowns in a game until now. Denver's best wide receiver was Demaryius Thomas, and Peyton Manning finally looked his way in the 3rd quarter as he sped past Corey Graham and got into the end zone for the first of 14 times that season. Denver had 5 different players with 10 or more touchdowns that year, and Thomas led the team. Touchdown number 6 was on the board. Now, touchdown number 7 almost never happened. With 12 minutes left in the fourth quarter, second-year linebacker Danny Trevathan jumped in front of a Joe Flacco pass and took it back for what looked like a touchdown. Except it wasn't, because before crossing the goal line, Trevathan let go of the ball inches short of the end zone in a move that made Deshaun Jackson famous half a decade earlier. It took Trevathan 2.5 more seasons to finally score his lone career touchdown, a pick 6 against old Phillip Rivers in 2015. Here's the bright side though. If Trevathan scores and makes it 49-17 early in the 4th, Denver probably calls off the Dogs. It's most likely Brock Osweiler time as Manning goes to the bench. And while Peyton Manning's 6 touchdowns are impressive, it's something he had done twice before in his career. 7 touchdowns got you in rarefied air. The NFL had become a passing league, and still 7 touchdowns hadn't been done since the 60s when Vikings QB Joe Kapp threw 7 against the Colts, who were of course also a Baltimore team at the time. Also, never forget Tom Brady never threw 7 touchdowns in a game. Matt Flynn once threw 6 touchdowns, which means anyone can throw 6, and it's wildly unimpressive. Nick Foles would go on to also throw 7 touchdowns in a game in 2013, and Drew Brees joined the elite club in November of 2015 in a shootout against Peyton's brother Eli, who happened to throw 6 in that game. But back to Danny T. Trevathan's non-touchdown had given the Ravens a little bit of life, and they had the Broncos stuck in 3rd and 8. With the scars of the last game still lingering, Denver wasn't going to just sit on the ball. They couldn't, because head coach John Fox had drawn so much criticism for his conservative play calling late in the divisional round game, which was well deserved, that he had to be aggressive. He had Peyton Manning and a stable of playmakers, so it was time to put them to fucking use, wasn't it, Foxy? Wasn't it, Foxy? Maybe. The most dangerous play in the Broncos' arsenal was getting DT in space. Denver knew that. When they needed a touchdown in the 4th quarter in the divisional game, they threw a bubble screen to Demaryius Thomas, who weaved his way into the end zone. Manning saw the corners playing off once again and audible to the same exact play, the only difference being that it was flipped to the left and you had Wes Welker blocking instead of Brandon Stokely. And I really can't tell the difference between those two guys when I look at them. Which is why the result was the same. Touchdown number 7. Elvis Dumerville was offside and the penalty was declined. For all intents and purposes, this game was over and Manning was in the record books yet again. It's impossible to talk about this era of Broncos football and not mention the loss of both Demaryius Thomas and Ronnie Hillman, who passed away in the last couple years. Both of these guys were big in this game and big for Denver when they won the Super Bowl in 2015. Besides watching Manning smoke the Ravens like a Colorado blunt, watching those two guys play at their peak was one of the big takeaways I had when I relived this game. And I wanted to make sure we pointed that out because their loss to the Broncos and the Denver Broncos community has been big. And ultimately, when I go back and watch this game, or really any other game of this era, it feels like no time has passed at all, while simultaneously feeling like ancient history. The Broncos were the most watchable team in football, and now they're the least. The most high-powered offense of all time, and now they don't have one. And we've waited for a long time for anything remotely resembling these types of games. And even though every Broncos fan would trade this game if they could just get that divisional round back against the Ravens, the revenge after being bounced from the playoffs to throw 7 touchdowns against the team that did it to you felt a little rewarding. But we all know that this season would not end happily either. Thanks for watching That's Good Sports. Please subscribe here on YouTube if you enjoyed the video or made it this far into the episode. And let me know if there's a crazy game you'd like to see me recap.